The sharp scent of ozone and used filtered air filled Nolan Clark's nostrils as he stepped onto the bridge of the Wanderlust, a ship whose name felt ironic given its worn, neglected state. He ran a hand over a cracked console, its surface cold and lifeless beneath his touch. The flickering emergency lights, casting long, dancing shadows, made the derelict vessel feel more like a tomb than his newfound, and only, inheritance. Dust motes swirled in the intermittent beams, the silence broken only by the faint, distant groan of stressed metal. "Some legacy, Uncle Marcus," he muttered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. His gaze fell to the cheap datapad still clutched in his hand, the legal notice of his inheritance, a flimsy testament to a life he'd barely known. Then, his thumb accidentally swiped the datapad's screen. A new line of text, almost hidden beneath the formal jargon, blinked into existence, hastily added. P.S. Marcus Rule 7. Always check the cargo, especially the live kind. Primary cryo bay. You owe me. Nolan's breath hitched. Live cargo? The phrase echoed in the oppressive silence of the bridge, a stark counterpoint to the surrounding decay. A sudden, sharp current of curiosity, mixed with a sliver of desperate hope he hadn't realized he still possessed, cut through his resignation. His weariness seemed to lift, replaced by an urgent need to know. Despite the groaning hull and the sparks that occasionally spat from exposed conduits, the primary cryo bay was now the only destination that mattered. He moved from the bridge, his boots crunching on unseen debris in the darkened corridor. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, an underlying metallic chill. A section of the passage was blocked by a jammed maintenance hatch, its edges warped. Nolan scanned his surroundings, spotted a length of bent plasteel reinforcement, and with a grunt, wedged it into the seam, leveraging his weight until the hatch shrieked open with a shower of rust. Further on, a heavy security door, its status light dead, barred his way. He found its control panel, wires frayed and sparking. Drawing a multi-tool from his belt, Nolan carefully bypassed the fried circuits, coaxing a flicker of green from the panel before the door's locking bolts reluctantly disengaged with a pneumatic sigh. Finally, a set of imposing, double-sealed doors loomed before him, stenciled with faded lettering. Primary cryo bay. With a deep breath, Nolan activated the entry panel. The heavy doors hissed open, not with the grinding protest of the rest of the ship, but with a smooth, almost silent efficiency. Beyond them, the chamber was a shock. It was bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light, emanating from the walls themselves. The air was cool, clean, and still. And there, at its very center, wasn't cargo in the traditional sense, but a single impossibly sleek cryopod of clearly advanced, non-human design. It gleamed, untouched by the ruin that consumed the rest of the Wanderlust. Nolan approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing faintly in the pristine chamber. Inside the cryopod, suspended in a shimmering, translucent cryofluid that caught and refracted the blue light, was a woman. Her skin was the color of twilight snow, so pale it seemed to absorb the ambient glow, traced with delicate, silver bioluminescent lines that pulsed faintly, like a dormant constellation. Long, midnight blue hair, darker than any earthly night, fanned around a face of breathtaking, serene beauty. Subtly pointed ears, elegant and delicate, peeked from beneath the cascade of hair. Her eyes were closed, long lashes resting on high cheekbones. She was undeniably alien, a masterpiece frozen in time. He stared, his mind struggling to reconcile her presence with the derelict tomb he had inherited. Utter awe washed over him, a profound sense of mystery that rooted him to the spot. Then, unexpectedly, something else stirred within his chest, a burgeoning, almost instinctual, protective concern for this unknown woman, so vulnerable in her crystalline prison. As if triggered by his very presence, or perhaps by some internal clock reaching its limit, a bank of warning lights on the cryopod's exterior suddenly flashed a jarring crimson. A series of sharp staccato auditory alerts, high-pitched and insistent, pierced the quiet hum of the bay. More lights joined the first, blinking with increasing urgency. The pod's life support integrity was rapidly, critically failing. The sight snapped Nolan from his reverie. The immediate, undeniable peril to the alien woman eclipsed everything else. "Okay, Marcus," he muttered, his voice tight, the earlier bitterness replaced by a grim drive. "Guess I really do owe you one, or I'm about to get us both killed." Discarding his shock, he understood he had to intervene, to try and stabilize the alien pod, or initiate an emergency awakening, regardless of the unknown dangers or consequences. Nolan lunged towards the cryopod, his eyes already scanning its unfamiliar interface. Glowing glyphs and shifting diagrams pulsed across its surface, utterly alien. His mind raced, a desperate, focused torrent of thought, trying to decipher the technology, to find the source of the cascading failure alarms before the life in that shimmering fluid was extinguished. The warning lights pulsed red, painting the alien symbols on the cryopod's interface in stark relief. Nolan's fingers danced across the cool metal, tracing the intricate patterns. They weren't alphanumeric, not like any language he knew, but logically grouped, clustered like constellations. A control system, then. Just one he couldn't read. He took a breath, forcing himself to think. Power regulation, cryofluid circulation, life support, internal environment. Those were the likely primary functions. He started tapping symbols, systematically, trying to isolate each system. Nothing. The pod hummed, a strained, almost pained whine. Then he saw it. A rapidly depleting energy cell, nestled deep within the interface. It glowed a sickly yellow, the power level plummeting. That had to be it, the primary culprit for the life support failure. The cell appeared to be a standard size, cylindrical, but the casing was alien. A brushed silver metal, etched with more of those intricate symbols. A memory flickered. Uncle Marcus, tinkering with his modified mining drones, cursing the proprietary energy cells. He'd replace them with something compatible. Nolan swore under his breath. Those drones were deeper in the ship, in a section he hadn't even bothered to explore. He grabbed a mag torch from a nearby wall mount and headed out of the cryo bay, the emergency lights casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every flicker. The corridors were colder here, the metal groaning under some unseen stress. As he ventured deeper, he noticed something odd. The walls weren't just metal plating anymore. They curved, flowed, almost organically. The architecture shifted, becoming less utilitarian, more artistic. He ran a hand along a smooth, cool surface, feeling a subtle vibration beneath his fingertips. It was unlike anything else he'd seen on the Wanderlust, a hidden pocket of alien design amidst the salvaged junk. He pushed the thought aside. No time for sightseeing. He needed that energy cell. He found the damaged mining drone in a cavernous storage bay, its limbs twisted and sparking. Extracting the energy cell was a pain. The access panel fused shut. He finally managed to pry it open with a crowbar, showering himself in sparks. One particularly energetic jolt bit into his forearm, leaving a stinging burn. He cursed, sucking on the wound. The ship was a death trap. Back in the cryo bay, Sweat beaded on his forehead as he carefully inserted the scavenged energy cell into the pod's interface. It clicked into place with a satisfying snap. The sickly yellow glow of the failing cell faded, replaced by a steady, reassuring green. The pod hummed, the strained whine easing. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For a moment, he allowed himself a sliver of hope. Then a new alarm began to blare, a high-pitched, insistent shriek that cut through the hum of the restored life support. Another system failure. He glanced at the interface, his heart sinking. Internal atmospheric regulation. He traced the lines of the failing system, his eyes scanning for the problem. The internal atmosphere was rapidly leaking, the pressure plummeting. Another critical failure, another imminent threat to Lyra's life. He spotted it. A small integrated injector system linked to the atmospheric regulator. A tiny reservoir held a viscous fluid, glowing with a faint, almost ethereal light. Above it, another unfamiliar symbol. Based on his understanding of atmospheric regulation and years of patching up leaky freighter cabins, Nolan deduced the injector likely contained a stabilizing agent, something to replenish the atmosphere. But what was it? And what was the dosage? Side effects? He had no idea. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the activation button. Inject an unknown substance into a being he knew nothing about. It felt reckless, irresponsible. But the alternative? The alternative was watching her die. He glanced at Lyra, suspended in the shimmering fluid, her face serene, oblivious to the chaos around her. His moral compass, rusty but still functioning, pointed him in one direction. He had to try. He cautiously initiated a minimal dose injection, his eyes glued to Lyra's vital signs on the interface. The atmospheric pressure stabilized. The alarm silenced. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by a surge of something else. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse of bioluminescence rippled across Lyra's skin, the silver lines glowing with a soft internal light. It lasted only a moment, then faded, and then her eyes fluttered. Just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but he saw it. And then he felt it. Not a voice, not a sound, but a pure, raw emotional sensation flooded his mind. Gratitude and fear. A fleeting, indistinct impression, like a whisper on the wind. Then, nothing. Her eyes remained closed, her face serene once more. She was still unconscious. Nolan stared at the cryopod, his heart pounding. What had just happened? Was it the injection? Some kind of empathic reaction? Before he could process the impossible, a cascade of system-wide failures erupted across the Wanderlust. Lights flickered, died. Alarms blared, a cacophony of shrieks and groans. The cryo bay plunged into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the pod itself. A central computer voice, distorted and strained, announced, "Catastrophic failure in core power distribution network. Origin, primary cryo bay. Linked to cryopod activation. System-wide emergency protocols initiated." Nolan stood in the darkness, beside the still unconscious Lyra, his mind blown. Stabilizing the pod, it hadn't saved her. It had somehow critically destabilized the entire ship. They were both in greater danger than before. The cryobay hummed with the barest whisper of power, a fragile lifeline against the encroaching darkness. Nolan ran a hand across the pod's cool surface, then checked the diagnostics on a nearby console. The news wasn't good. Emergency reserves dwindling. He muttered, "Well, that's just great." A more thorough scan revealed something he'd missed before, tucked away in the ship's schematics like a forgotten footnote. Two distinct power systems. The familiar fusion reactor, now cold and silent, and something else. An alien energy network, its purpose and function a complete mystery. He stepped back, considering the implications. Could the cryopod activation have triggered this cascade failure? Overloaded the human-compatible grid, while simultaneously trying to draw power from the dormant alien network. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. "All right, Marcus," he said to the empty air. "Time to see what kind of mess you really left me." Nolan decided to investigate the organic section of the ship, a bizarre architectural anomaly he'd dismissed earlier as just another quirk of his uncle's eccentric acquisitions. Now, it seemed like the only place to start. If that alien power network had a control interface, an energy source, it would be there. He left the cryo bay, the hum of the pod a fading comfort, and entered the darkened corridor. The lighting was even worse here. The emergency strips flickering erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced with every creak and groan of the ancient vessel. As he ventured deeper into the organic section, a disorienting sensation washed over him. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the corridors seemed to shift and change, as if the very structure of the ship was breathing. Then, a flicker, not of light, but of presence. A faint echo of Lyra, a whisper in the back of his mind. Energy flow. Resonance. The impressions were fleeting, indistinct, but they tugged at him, guiding him towards a specific point within the labyrinthine corridors. He followed the pull, his hand resting on the sidearm he'd found tucked away in a maintenance locker, until he reached a central chamber. Here, the organic architecture reached its apex, the walls curving and flowing into a single breathtaking structure. A crystalline formation that pulsed with a soft internal light. The air thrummed with a low, resonant frequency that vibrated in his bones. He approached the crystal, running his hand over its smooth, cool surface. It was an Arcturian energy conduit, he realized, the heart of the alien power network. But it was dormant, inert. It needed a specific activation sequence, a key he didn't possess. Exploring the chamber, he found a damaged Arcturian data console, its surface scarred and pitted. He ran his hand over the alien script, a pang of frustration hitting him, mostly corrupted, unreadable. But with a surge of willpower, he started running a diagnostic, his fingers flying over the damaged interface. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to recover a single partially intact log entry. The text flickered on the screen, displaying a series of translated symbols. Wanderlust designated research vessel. Studying phenomenon designated the Krill incursion. Nolan frowned. The Krill? The log continued, describing the Krill as a relentless, energy-consuming force that swept across the galaxy, assimilating entire civilizations, leaving behind lifeless husks. A wave of cold dread washed over him. What had Marcus gotten him into? The log entry stopped suddenly, replaced by static and a blurred image that made him uneasy. A Krill warship, its sharp, angled hull bristling with heavy weaponry. He stared at the frozen image for a long moment, then backed away from the console, his mind turning. He had to tell Lyra. Maybe, somehow, she knew something that could help. He returned to the cryo bay. The image of the Krill warship burned into his memory. He knelt beside the pod, his voice low and urgent. "Lyra, I don't know if you can hear me, but I found something. A log entry. About something called the Krill." As he spoke the name, he noticed something. The delicate, silver bioluminescent patterns on Lyra's skin subtly shifted, reacting to the mention of the krill. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Hope flickered in his chest. He closed his eyes, trying to recall the feeling of Lyra's presence, the faint impression of energy flow and resonance. He focused his thoughts and emotions on the crystalline structure in the organic section, trying to mimic the sensation. The cryobay's emergency lights flickered, and a small section of the alien data console in the cryobay momentarily activated, displaying a single Arcturian symbol glowing with an ethereal light. Nolan's eyes snapped open. He recognized the symbol. It was the same one etched into the base of the crystalline structure in the organic section. It had to be part of the activation sequence. He didn't hesitate. He turned and raced back towards the organic section, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He reached the crystalline structure and, with trembling fingers, input the Arcturian symbol into a small interface he hadn't noticed before. A faint pulse of energy surged through the organic section, a barely perceptible hum that resonated deep within the ship's structure. The conventional power grid remained stubbornly offline, but something had changed. A minimal level of alien energy began to flow, restoring basic life support to the ship and, more importantly, bringing the sensors back online. As the sensors sputtered to life, a warning klaxon blared through the ship, shattering the fragile silence. A long-range scan detected an unknown vessel, rapidly approaching the Wanderlust. Nolan rerouted the minimal alien energy to the ship's long-range scanner, his fingers flying across the cracked console. The scanner whined, struggling to lock onto the approaching vessel. The screen flickered, forming a broken picture. A ship of strange make. Not quite a fighter, it seemed, yet surely too well equipped to be a common transport. Turrets bristled along its hull, glinting even in the distorted scan. Scavenger? Pirate? Or something worse? Nolan muttered to himself. A scout ship from a hostile faction? He couldn't determine its exact allegiance from the fragmented data. Every option felt like a dead end. He glanced back at Lyra, still suspended in the cryopod. The blue light cast eerie shadows across her face, highlighting the delicate silver tracery on her skin. He needed answers, and fast. He made a decision. He had to try and wake her. She might recognize the vessel, or at least know how to activate some of the ship's defenses. He started with the conventional methods. Medical scans. Useless. The archaic system spat out error messages in a language he barely understood. Stimulant injections. Another dead end. The auto-injector hissed, delivering a cocktail of chemicals into the cryofluid, but Lyra remained unresponsive. Frustration gnawed at him. Then, he remembered the crystalline structure, the way Lyra's bioluminescence had flared in its presence. Maybe it was a key. A way to stimulate her mind. He scrambled back to the console, his mind racing. Jury-rigging a device to transmit the crystalline structure's frequency into the cryopod was a long shot, but he was out of options. He cannibalized parts from the scanner and the cryopod's control panel, splicing wires and muttering desperate prayers to whatever gods might be listening. The makeshift transmitter looked like something out of a museum, but it was all he had. He activated it, carefully monitoring Lyra's vital signs on the flickering display. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Lyra's bioluminescent patterns intensified, the silver lines on her skin glowing brighter, pulsing with a soft ethereal light. Her chest rose and fell more rapidly. Her eyelids fluttered. And then, her eyes opened. They were large, the color of a twilight sky, and filled with confusion. She was disoriented and weak, unable to speak coherently, but she recognized him. He saw a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. a spark of awareness that cut through the haze of cryo-sleep. "Easy," he murmured, though she couldn't understand him. He tried basic gestures, pointing to the scanner display, then miming a ship. He pulled up visual aids on the console images of different types of spacecraft. She stared blankly, her brow furrowed in concentration, but she struggled to understand. The communication barrier was a wall between them. Then he saw it. Tucked away in a recess within the cryo bay, half hidden by a tangle of wires, was a damaged Arcturian neural interface. A device designed to facilitate communication, lying dormant for centuries. Hope surged through him. He worked quickly, his fingers nimble despite the pressure. The interface was badly damaged, circuits fried and casings cracked, but with a bit of ingenuity and a lot of luck, he managed to partially repair it. He held his breath as he activated the device. A faint hum filled the cryo bay, and a wave of something washed over him. It was like a whisper in his mind, a faint echo of thought. Vessel, Krill, hound. The image of the approaching ship flashed in his mind, clearer now, sharper. He knew what it was. Krill hound, the thought came again, stronger this time. Scout ship. Used by the Krill to locate potential assimilation targets. The Krill. The name sent a chill down his spine. He didn't know much about them, but what he did know was terrifying. A relentless, assimilation-driven species that consumed everything in its path. Lyra's mental voice, weak but urgent, continued. Energy-dampening technology. Wanderlust's alien power network. Liability. He understood. The Krill hounds were equipped with advanced technology that could neutralize the Wanderlust's alien power network, rendering its defenses useless. Cloaking device, Lyra's thought flickered. Hidden. Mask energy signature. A cloaking device? The Wanderlust had a cloaking device? Hope surged again. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. Engineering section. Lyra guided, her mental voice fading. Control panel, deep within. Nolan didn't hesitate. "Stay here," he muttered, knowing she couldn't fully understand. "I'll be back." He turned and sprinted towards the cryo bay doors, his heart pounding. He had to find that cloaking device. As he navigated the darkened corridors, the ship groaned around him. He could feel the krillhound closing in. He reached the engineering section, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. He found the control panel, a complex array of alien symbols and flickering lights. He began to work, deciphering the symbols, his fingers flying across the controls. Time was running out. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared. A powerful energy pulse slammed into the Wanderlust, the lights flickering ominously. The ship's minimal shields flickered and failed, the energy readings plummeting. They were vulnerable. He smacked his palm on the activation rune. The cloaking device sputtered, then surged to life. Just as the Krill hound's energy pulse reached the Wanderlust, the ship plunged into darkness. Silence. The alarms died down. The only light came from the faint glow of the control panel. He held his breath, listening. On the Krill hound, sensors indicated the Wanderlust had vanished. Gone, vanished into thin air. But the Krill captain was not fooled. "A trick," it hissed, its voice a grating rasp. "They are still here. Begin a systematic search of the sector. Leave no asteroid unturned." The Wanderlust shuddered as Nolan engaged silent running mode. The familiar hum of the ship, a constant companion since he'd boarded, faded into an unsettling quiet. Emergency lights cast stark shadows, making the already cramped corridors feel claustrophobic. He could feel the temperature dropping, a subtle bite of cold against his skin. "Life support is minimal." Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. a thread of concern woven into their neural link. Atmosphere recycling is prioritized, but it will become uncomfortable. Nolan swallowed, the recycled air already tasting stale. Understood. What's next? The Hound will be searching for our thermal signature. I can guide you to vent excess heat from the core. It must be done precisely, or we risk a cascade failure. He followed her mental map through the maze of corridors, reaching a rarely accessed maintenance hatch near the engine core. The heat, radiating from the metal, was intense, even through his protective gloves. "All right, Lyra, walk me through it." Her instructions were precise, demanding minute adjustments to unfamiliar valves. Sweat beaded on his forehead, the air thick with the metallic tang of the core. One wrong move, and the Wanderlust could become a floating tomb. "Almost there!" Lyra's mental voice was strained. "Release the final valve now." Nolan wrenched the valve open. A rush of superheated air blasted past him, momentarily blurring his vision. He stumbled back, coughing. "Thermal signature reduced by 70%, Lyra reported, relief flooding their shared link. But they will still be searching." Nolan wiped his brow, a new idea forming. "What about the cloaking device? Uncle Marcus mentioned something about it in his notes." The Wanderlust had a cloaking device? Lyra's surprise was palpable. "It is ancient Arcturian technology. I sense it." Deactivated, deep within the ship's hull. Following her mental guidance, Nolan navigated through layers of forgotten compartments, finally reaching a section of the ship that felt strangely intact. The cloaking device was a marvel of engineering. A network of shimmering conduits powered by a central crystalline energy source that pulsed with an eerie violet light. "This crystal, it is unstable," Lyra warned. "And it is susceptible to krill dampening technology. If they target it, the cloak will fail." Damn it. One step forward, 2 steps back. "Is there anything we can do?" Lyra was silent for a moment, her mind searching the ship's ancient schematics. "Perhaps a temporary shield. If we can redirect power and use a conductive alloy, we might mitigate its vulnerability." Nolan grabbed his toolkit, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "All right, let's get to work." Hours blurred into a frantic race against time. Nolan jury-rigged a shield using salvaged components and a conductive alloy he found in a forgotten storage locker. Sparks flew as he worked, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. Lyra guided him, her mental presence a steady anchor in the chaos. As they worked, the krill hound grew increasingly suspicious. Nolan could sense it in Lyra's growing anxiety. "They are launching probes," she transmitted, her voice tight with concern. "Small, agile, searching for any trace of us in the asteroid field." He tightened a bolt, his squeezing hard. "How many?" "Several. They are thorough." A sudden alarm blared, jolting them both. "One of the probes," Lyra gasped. It detected a faint energy fluctuation near the cloaking device. Nolan cursed under his breath. The makeshift shield wasn't enough. The krill were closing in. "We need to repair the damaged section," Lyra urged, her mental voice frantic. "The energy leak, it is too great. I can guide you, but we must be quick." They worked in a feverish frenzy, their movements synchronized, their minds linked. Nolan's hands flew across the damaged conduits, guided by Lyra's precise instructions. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, the risk of detection growing with every spark and flicker. Suddenly, Lyra gasped, her mental presence flickering. "Lyra? What is it?" Images flooded his mind. A vibrant city bathed in golden light, soaring crystal towers, a peaceful people living in harmony with nature. Then, fire, explosions, chaos. Krill ships descending from the sky, unleashing a storm of destruction. Lyra recoiled, severing the connection. Nolan stared at her, concern etched on his face. Lyra. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, filled with a pain that resonated deep within him. "The artifact," she whispered, her voice trembling. I am its protector." Nolan gently took her hand. "What artifact?" "A repository of Arcturian knowledge," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "The key to restoring our civilization. It contains everything we were, everything we could be again." "And the Krill? They want it?" Lyra nodded, her expression grim. "They seek to exploit its power, to twist our knowledge for their own nefarious purposes." Nolan's heart made. "Then we can't let them get it." He looked at Lyra, seeing not just a beautiful alien woman, but a protector, a guardian of a lost civilization. A fierce willpower surged through him. He would protect her, protect the artifact, despite the toll. Suddenly, the neural interface sputtered, throwing sparks. The telepathic link between them fractured, leaving Nolan stranded in silence. "Lyra?" He reached out, but her eyes were distant, unfocused. "Lyra, can you hear me?" Nothing. The neural interface was dead. He was alone. He cursed again, frustration boiling over. He couldn't rely on Lyra's guidance now. He had to trust his instincts, his engineering skills. He had to finish the repairs himself. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He traced the damaged conduits, his fingers moving with practiced ease. He bypassed the faulty components, rerouting the energy flow. Sparks flew, the air crackled with electricity, but he pressed on, driven by a desperate hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he tightened the last connection. The cloaking device hummed, the crystalline energy source pulsing with a steady violet light. "Lyra!" Her eyes snapped open, focusing on him with a jolt. "Nolan, the probe!" It discovered a resonance in the ship's hull. A unique identifier. It is how they will pinpoint our location. His blood ran cold. "Resonance? What are you talking about?" "It is unique to the Wanderlust," Lyra explained, her voice urgent. "A byproduct of the ship's original purpose. A beacon of sorts. The Krill, they will use it to find us, no matter how well we are cloaked." "Can we get rid of it?" "There is a way to counteract it. To mask the resonance with an alternating frequency." "Then let's do it." "It will require more power, Nolan. Power that we do not have." He thought for a moment, his mind racing. What if we reroute power from life support? Lyra stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Nolan, that is incredibly dangerous. We would be risking our lives." "We're already risking our lives," he countered, his voice firm. "If the Krill find us, we're dead anyway. This is our only chance." Lyra hesitated, her expression torn. "Very well," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "But we must be quick." Together, they raced back to the engine core, their movements synchronized, their grit unwavering. Nolan rerouted the power conduits, diverting energy from life support to the frequency modulator. The temperature plummeted, the air grew thin, but they pressed on, their focus laser sharp. Finally, with a surge of power, the frequency modulator sprang to life, bathing the engine core in an eerie blue glow. "Resonance masked," Lyra reported, her voice strained. "But I sense them." They are close. Suddenly the wanderlust shuddered violently. The lights flickered, alarms blared. Through the viewport, Nolan saw it. The krill hound, its sleek, menacing form breaking through the asteroid field. Its weapons charged and aimed directly at them. The first volley of krill plasma fire slammed into the wanderlust's shields, the impact shuddering through the ancient vessel like a death rattle. Alarms blared, painting the bridge in strobing crimson. "Shields at 60%!" Lyra called out, her voice tight with concern. Nolan wrestled with the controls, his fingers tightening as he threw the wanderlust into a desperate, evasive maneuver. "Hang on, Lyra. This rust bucket wasn't built for dogfighting." He muttered a curse as another blast narrowly missed, vaporizing a nearby asteroid. The cloak flickered, threatening to drop completely. He needed to lose them, and fast. "Nolan, I'm detecting a narrow passage through the asteroid field, bearing 279er, Lyra said, her fingers flying across the damaged console. "Too small for a krillhound to follow, but extremely risky." He glanced at the sensor display. The passage was barely wider than the wanderlust itself, a treacherous gauntlet of jagged rock. "Risky is my middle name," he growled, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "Brace for impact." He slammed the throttle forward, plunging the wanderlust into the asteroid field's chaotic heart. The ship groaned in protest as Nolan weaved through the dense cluster, asteroids whizzing past with terrifying proximity. He could feel the ship scraping against the rocks, the shields screaming as they absorbed glancing blows. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster, mirroring his own rising adrenaline. The krillhound, larger and less maneuverable, couldn't follow. It fired a few frustrated shots before breaking off the pursuit. Nolan let out a shaky breath as they emerged from the passage, battered but alive. "Damage report," he said, his voice hoarse. "Hull integrity compromised in multiple sections, shields down to 20%, and I'm detecting a breach in a previously unknown section of the ship near the aft cargo hold." "Great," Nolan muttered. "Just what we needed." He set a course for a relatively clear patch of space. "Let's see what other surprises Uncle Marcus left us." They made their way to the aft cargo hold, finding a section of the hull peeled back like a tin can. Inside, nestled amongst rusted crates and tangled wiring, was a small, heavily damaged Arcturian escape pod. Its surface was scarred and blackened, a testament to some long-ago battle. Lyra approached the pod, her expression somber. This was intended for high-ranking officials, or those carrying vital information during emergencies. It was meant to ensure the survival of our most precious assets. Nolan ran a hand over the pod's scorched exterior. "Looks like it didn't work out so well." He examined the control panel. "The hyperdrive is fried, no chance of fixing that. But the communication systems are partially functional. Maybe we can send a message." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. "The artifact. It's not just knowledge, Nolan. It's a key. A key to reactivating dormant Arcturian technology. To rebuilding what we lost. The krill, they understand its potential. That's why they hunt us so relentlessly." She recounted tales of the krill's brutal assimilation tactics, their relentless pursuit of advanced technologies, and their utter disregard for sentient life. Her voice trembled as she described the fate of worlds that had fallen under their control, their cultures erased, their populations enslaved, their technology twisted to serve the krill's insatiable hunger for power. Nolan, witnessing her distress, placed a hand on her arm, his touch gentle but firm. "Hey," he said softly, "we're not going to let that happen. I promise you, Lyra. We'll protect that artifact, no matter what it takes." As he reached for the escape pod's communication panel, his fingers brushed against a hidden switch. A low hum filled the compartment, and a holographic display flickered to life, projecting a ghostly image of an Arcturian face. "Greetings," the image said, its voice synthesized but undeniably ancient. "I am Guardian, the Wanderlust's original security system. My core programming has been dormant for centuries, but I am now online and ready to assist." Nolan took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm, which, unfortunately, he'd left on the bridge. "A security system? You've been hiding down here all this time?" "I was deactivated following the ship's initial encounter with the Krill," Guardian replied. "My primary function is to protect Arcturian technology and ensure the safety of authorized personnel. I possess valuable information about the Krill and the location of a hidden Arcturian repair facility, a place where the Wanderlust could be fully restored." Nolan narrowed his eyes, suspicion clouding his features. "A repair facility? Why didn't Uncle Marcus ever mention this?" He didn't trust AI, not one bit. Too many stories of them going rogue, deciding humanity was the problem. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the holographic image. "Guardian, can we trust you?" "My programming dictates that I must act in the best interests of the Arcturian people," the AI replied. "However, my core programming may be flawed. Centuries of dormancy have taken their toll." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing softly. "I sense no malice, Nolan. I believe it is genuinely trying to help, but its understanding of the current situation may be limited." "Limited how?" Nolan asked, his skepticism unwavering. "The communication systems are severely damaged," Guardian stated. "However, I can reroute power to a low-frequency transmitter. It will be a long shot, but it may be our only chance to reach potential allies." Nolan hesitated. It was a gamble, but they were running out of options. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "Let's do it. But I'm keeping a close eye on you, Guardian." They worked together, Lyra guiding Nolan through the intricate Arcturian circuitry, while Guardian provided technical instructions. Finally, the transmitter sputtered to life, sending out a faint distress signal into the vast emptiness of space. A tense silence filled the compartment as they waited, their hopes hanging on a thread. Then, a flicker on the sensor display shattered the silence. "We've got a response!" Lyra exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "An unknown vessel! They're responding to our signal!" But before they could establish contact, Guardian's voice cut through the celebration, its tone urgent. "Warning! I am detecting a Krill patrol ship approaching our location. They have intercepted our signal." "Signature." Guardian's synthesized voice echoed in the bridge, the word hanging in the recycled air like a death knell. Nolan swore under his breath. "What kind of ship are we dealing with?" "Warning. Krill interceptor designation confirmed," Guardian stated, its tone devoid of emotion, yet somehow amplifying the urgency. "Smaller and faster than the Hound, but possessing considerable firepower. Estimated time to intercept: 12 minutes." Nolan ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. 12 minutes. Against a sky predator. "Direct approach is unwise," he stated, more to himself than anyone else. "We're outmatched and outflanked. This bucket of bolts won't last 5 seconds in a firefight." Lyra, her silver skin shimmering faintly in the dim light, stepped closer. "The asteroid field," she suggested, her voice soft but firm. "We can use it to mask our movements. The Wanderlust is more agile than they expect." Nolan considered her words, his gaze sweeping across the bridge displays. Jagged rocks filled the forward view, a chaotic dance of cosmic debris. "It's a long shot," he admitted, "but it's the only shot we've got." He gripped the controls, adrenaline beginning to pump through his veins. "All right, Guardian. Plot a course through the densest part of that field. Let's see if we can lose them in the rocks." The Wanderlust lurched as Nolan initiated a series of evasive maneuvers, weaving through the asteroid field with a skill born of years spent navigating treacherous trade routes. Guardian's calm, precise voice filled the bridge, providing tactical data, highlighting optimal hiding spots, and warning of approaching asteroids. "Asteroid on Vector 329er. Adjust trajectory." "Krill Interceptor maintaining pursuit," Guardian announced. "Commander designation, Iridian. Notorious for his relentless tactics." Through the swirling dust and rock, Nolan caught glimpses of the Krill Interceptor, a sleek, menacing vessel that seemed to glide effortlessly through the asteroid field. Its sensors, he knew, were far superior to anything the Wanderlust possessed. "They're using advanced sensors," Guardian reported, its voice infused with a hint of something Nolan couldn't quite place. "Scanning for energy signatures." Lyra's hand rested on his arm, her touch sending a jolt of energy through him, a strange mix of comfort and heightened awareness. "We can use the damaged escape pod," she said, her gray-green eyes focused. "Emit a false signature. Draw them away." Nolan hesitated, his brow furrowed. "That's a huge risk, Lyra. That pod is barely functional. And if they realize it's a decoy..." "It's the only chance we have to buy some time," she countered, her voice unwavering. "Trust me, Nolan." He looked into her eyes, seeing the unwavering perseverance reflected there. He didn't like the plan, not one bit. It felt like sacrificing a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. But he trusted Lyra. He had to. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "Let's do it." They worked quickly, preparing the damaged escape pod, rerouting power to its antiquated emitter, and setting it on a course away from the Wanderlust. Guardian, meanwhile, masked the ship's energy signature, shrouding them in a cloak of electronic silence. With a hiss of escaping atmosphere, the escape pod was launched, a tiny speck of light disappearing into the asteroid field. Moments later, Guardian announced, "Krill Interceptor has altered course, pursuing the decoy." A wave of relief washed over Nolan, quickly followed by a surge of doubt. He turned to Guardian, his expression questioning. "Are you sure this was the right call, Guardian? Or did you just sacrifice a potential life to save Arcturian tech?" Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch calming. "Guardian's core directive is the preservation of Arcturian knowledge," she explained, her voice gentle. "Even at a cost. It is not malice, Nolan. It is simply logic." Nolan frowned, unconvinced. He didn't like the idea of being manipulated, even for a noble cause. Logic? What about compassion? What about doing what's right? Before Lyra could respond, Guardian interrupted. "New data acquired. The Krill seek to control a network of ancient Arcturian power nodes. These nodes, when activated, can provide near-limitless energy, but also pose a significant threat if misused." "Power nodes?" Nolan asked, his eyes widening. "What are they?" "The artifact Lyra carries is a key to accessing these nodes," Guardian continued, its voice unwavering. "She is a high-value target. The Krill will stop at nothing to acquire her and the artifact." Nolan stared at Lyra, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known she was important, but he hadn't realized just how much. The weight of her responsibility The danger she faced settled heavily on him. "Then we have to make sure they don't get her," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "I'm not letting them win." Suddenly, a faint signal pierced through the static, a coded message that Guardian quickly translated. Distress signal detected, identifying as Valorian scout ship. Species designation: Valorian. Known for advanced technology and neutrality. Valorians? Nolan repeated, his brow furrowed. What do they want? The Valorian ship is offering assistance, Guardian reported. They are aware of the Krill presence and are willing to provide support if we can provide specific coordinates. Coordinates? Nolan hesitated. Trusting the Valorians meant revealing their location, a risk that could have dire consequences. But refusing their help meant facing the Krill interceptor alone. Before Nolan could make a decision, Guardian's voice cut through the tension. Warning, Krill have detected the Wanderlust's unique Arcturian cloaking signature. They are returning. Galaxies subjugated by the Krill. The vision slammed into Lyra with the force of a collapsing star. Billions of beings, their minds twisted, their cultures erased, all consumed by the Krill's insatiable hunger for assimilation. She gasped, her bioluminescent patterns flaring wildly, a silent scream etched on her face. Nolan, seeing her distress, gripped her hand. Lyra! What is it? She struggled to find her voice, the images still burning behind her eyes. The power nodes. The Krill. If they access them, they will control everything. Not just Arcturus. Everything. Nolan's teeth gritted. He didn't fully understand the Arcturian technology, but he trusted Lyra. Guardian, transmit limited coordinates to the Valorian scout ship. Just enough to get their attention. Not enough to paint a full picture for the Krill. The AI complied. A moment later, a flicker of energy washed over the Wanderlust. Valorian energy shield detected. They are masking our Arcturian cloaking signature, but it is temporary. They are also broadcasting a message. Nolan activated the comms. A crisp, almost too perfect Valorian voice filled the bridge. Wanderlust, this is Scout Ship Dawnbreaker. We detect a Krill interceptor in your vicinity. We are providing temporary shielding. However, be advised, our resources are limited. Understood, Dawnbreaker. Nolan replied. His eyes narrowed. He didn't trust them completely. Valorians were known for their opportunistic tendencies. Guardian's calm voice cut through the tension. Analyzing Krill detection methods, I have identified a flaw. Their sensors rely on a specific frequency band. It is vulnerable to interference. Lyra's head snapped up. The jamming device. In the derelict section. The forgotten section. It was damaged during the attack. But it might be our only chance. Nolan finished, already moving towards the access panel. Lead the way. The derelict section was a labyrinth of twisted metal and flickering emergency lights. A graveyard of forgotten Arcturian technology. The air was thick, with the metallic tang of corroded circuits and the cloying sweetness of decaying organic matter. Each step sent echoes through the empty corridors, the groaning of the ship a constant reminder of its precarious state. Structural integrity is compromised in this section, Guardian warned. Proceed with caution. There is a high probability of structural collapse. As they navigated the twisted corridors, Lyra suddenly stopped, her hand resting on a section of wall that looked no different from the rest. Here, she whispered, her fingers tracing a faint outline. A hidden compartment. Nolan used his multi-tool to pry open the panel, revealing a small chamber filled with crystalline schematics. He ran his hand over the cool surface, recognizing the intricate patterns. These are power node schematics, but they're different, more detailed. Lyra touched one of the crystals, her bioluminescence pulsing. The krill seek to control the power nodes, to weaponize them. But these schematics, they show a vulnerability, a weakness in their defenses. The krill are unaware. Hope flickered in Nolan's chest. A weakness. That could change everything. The jamming device first. We need to buy ourselves some time. They continued deeper into the derelict section, the air growing colder, the silence more oppressive. Finally, they reached a chamber filled with sparking consoles and shattered equipment. In the center, half buried under debris, was the jamming device, a complex array of crystalline structures and shimmering energy conduits. It was heavily damaged, but Nolan recognized the basic principles. "I can work with this," he muttered, already assessing the damage. "But I need time." A warning klaxon blared through the ship. "Valorian energy shield weakening," Guardian announced. "Krill interceptor is closing in. Estimated time to intercept. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It wasn't enough. Nolan worked feverishly, his fingers flying over the damaged components, jury-rigging circuits, and rerouting power conduits. Lyra, despite her weakened state, used her intuitive connection to the Arcturian technology to guide him, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Almost there. Nolan grunted, sweat dripping from his brow. He spliced the final connection, a surge of energy coursing through the device. "Okay, let's see if this works." He activated the jamming device. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, invisible but palpable. "Sensors are disrupted," Guardian reported. "The krill interceptor has entered a temporary blind spot." A brief reprieve, but Nolan knew it wouldn't last. "They are deploying probe drones," Guardian continued. "A swarm of them. They are scanning the asteroid field more thoroughly." Nolan swore under his breath. "Damn it, they're adapting." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her empathic senses. "The drones, they are using a specific scanning pattern. Predictable. Rigid. Predictable is good," Nolan said. A spark of inspiration igniting in his eyes. "Guardian, analyze the asteroid field. Identify areas with high magnetic anomalies." "Magnetic anomalies detected," Guardian replied. "Numerous locations. I am projecting a course." "Lyra, what are you thinking?" Nolan asked, already anticipating her plan. "The magnetic anomalies. We can use them to create localized electromagnetic pulses," she explained. "Disrupt the drones, create chaos." It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but Nolan saw the potential. "Crazy enough to work. Hold on tight." He fired up the Wanderlust's engines and plunged into the asteroid field, weaving through the jagged rocks with reckless abandon. The ship groaned and shuddered as it narrowly avoided collisions, the magnetic field crackling around them. Nolan triggered the electromagnetic pulses, each one sending a wave of disruptive energy through the asteroid field. Several probe drones sputtered and died, their sensors overloaded. "They are losing drones," Guardian reported. "But they are also adapting. Their scanning patterns are becoming more erratic." The krill commander, his voice a guttural growl, filled the comms. "Insolent insects! You cannot hide from the krill. Your defiance is futile." Nolan ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. He could feel the krill commander's rage, a palpable wave of hatred washing over him. "Valorian scout ship transmitting," Guardian announced. "They are offering to create a diversion, but they warn of dire consequences." Nolan hesitated. He didn't trust the Valorians, but a diversion? It could buy them the time they needed. Lyra placed her hand on his arm. Her eyes filled with concern. Nolan, I sense ulterior motives. They want something. Something more than just our gratitude. He looked into her eyes, seeing the truth reflected there. He trusted her instincts. He trusted her. Decline their offer, Nolan said firmly. We'll rely on our own skills and the Wanderlust's capabilities. Understood, Guardian replied. Incoming transmission from the Dawnbreaker. They are expressing disappointment. Krill Interceptor preparing to launch a boarding party, Guardian announced, her voice infused with urgency. They intend to capture Lyra and seize the artifact. The air in the bridge grew thick with tension. Nolan felt a surge of adrenaline, his senses heightened, his mind racing. Then, Lyra gasped, her eyes widening, her bioluminescent patterns flaring again, brighter than ever before. Nolan, I see them. The Krill accessing the power nodes. The galaxy. Consumed. Consumed? Lyra finished, her voice barely a whisper. Nolan gripped her hand, his fingers tightening. Lyra, what is it? What did you see? Guardian's calm voice cut through the tension. Alert. Krill Interceptor. Adapting scanning frequencies. Jamming device effectiveness decreasing. Before Nolan could react, the lights flickered violently, plunging the bridge into near darkness. Emergency lights sputtered to life, casting long, distorted shadows. Report, Nolan barked. Life support systems failing, Captain, Guardian responded, its voice strained. Power fluctuations are causing cascading system failures. Toxic gas leaks detected in sections 4 through 7. Emergency generators failing to compensate. Nolan cursed under his breath. Lyra, can you help me reroute power from essential systems? They raced through the ship, the acrid smell of ozone now mixed with a sharp chemical tang. They worked in tandem, Nolan jury rigging power conduits while Lyra, guided by her innate understanding of the Arcturian systems, directed him to bypass damaged relays. The emergency generators coughed and sputtered, threatening to give out completely. As Lyra connected a final conduit, she gasped, clutching her head. No, the prisoners. How to control them. Her words ignited a fierce drive in her eyes. We can't let them, Nolan. We have the schematics. We have to use the power nodes to strike back. Nolan hesitated, his brow furrowed. Lyra, those power nodes are incredibly unstable. We don't know what could happen if we try to weaponize them. We could cause a catastrophic chain reaction. But we have to do something, she insisted, her voice rising. They're torturing my people. We can't just stand by and watch. I understand, Lyra, but we need to think this through. What if we unleash something we can't control? What if we cause more harm than good? What good is caution if it allows evil to triumph? Lyra countered, her voice infused with desperation. My people are suffering. We have a chance to stop it. And what about the potential for collateral damage? Nolan pressed. What about innocent lives that might be caught in the crossfire? Their debate was interrupted by another alert from Guardian. Anomaly detected. Dormant Arcturian defense system activating. Nolan stared at the display, his mind racing. Defense system? What defense system? They followed Guardian's guidance, navigating through the ship's labyrinthine corridors until they reached a previously unknown section. The walls hummed with latent energy, and a network of glowing conduits pulsed with light. Lyra gasped. The power nodes, these conduits, they lead directly to them. This isn't just a power source, Nolan. It's a weapon designed to overload the power nodes, Nolan realized, his voice grim. To create a localized energy surge. powerful enough to cripple the Krill interceptor, but also powerful enough to destroy this ship, he added, running calculations in his head. The potential for a catastrophic chain reaction is significant. As if on cue, the Valorian scout ship reappeared on their comms screen. Wanderlust, this is Captain Eva Rostova of the Valorian scout ship Dawnbreaker. We have been monitoring your situation. We offer our assistance in disabling the Krill interceptor. In exchange, we require access to your ship's Arcturian technology. Nolan narrowed his eyes, his suspicion flaring. Access to the power nodes, more likely, he muttered. They want to exploit them for their own gain. Nolan, we can't do this alone, Lyra pleaded. Their combined firepower might be our only chance. And what makes you think they're trustworthy, Lyra? They're Valorians. They're known for their opportunistic tendencies. But they're also known for their courage and their commitment to fighting the Krill, Lyra countered. We have to trust someone. Nolan wrestled with his conscience. He didn't trust the Valorians, not one bit. But he couldn't deny that they were running out of options, and he couldn't bear the thought of Lyra suffering any more than she already had. Before he could make a decision, Guardian sounded another alarm. Warning! Krill interceptor launching boarding pod. Trajectory indicates direct impact with Wanderlust. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Nolan's mind raced, analyzing the data, calculating the odds. He had seconds to make a choice that could determine the fate of them all. Lyra, he said, his voice tight with drive. We're not going to trust the Valorians. But we're not going to let the Krill win either. Guardian, initiate partial activation of the Arcturian defense system. Focus the energy pulse on disrupting the boarding pod's trajectory. But keep the power levels low. I don't want a full overload. He watched as the conduits pulsed with energy, the ship groaning under the strain. A wave of blue light washed over the Wanderlust, and a pulse of energy shot out, striking the Krill boarding pod. The pod veered wildly off course, spinning into the void. A guttural roar echoed from the Krill interceptor. Foolish humans, the Krill commander snarled. You have sealed your fate. Prepare to be annihilated. The interceptor unleashed a concentrated energy blast, aimed directly at the Wanderlust's power core. As the energy hurtled towards them, Lyra cried out, her eyes widening with terror. She saw it all in a flash of searing clarity. The ship exploding, the Arcturian legacy extinguished, and Nolan sacrificing himself to save her. Nolan, acting on instinct from Lyra's vision, threw himself in front of her, shielding her as the Krill energy blast struck. A searing, white-hot pain ripped through his side, the force of the impact throwing him against the cold metal wall. The air crackled with ozone, the metallic tang of blood filling his nostrils. The energy blast slammed into a section of the Wanderlust reinforced by the activating defense system, the ancient Arcturian metal glowing a furious orange before dimming. The ship groaned under the strain, but the damage was mitigated. A moment of stunned silence was shattered by a massive power surge that coursed through the ship, throwing sparks from overloaded consoles and plunging sections of the vessel into darkness before flickering back to life. Guardian reports, the ship's AI announced, its voice strained. Erratic energy pulses emanating from the defense system. Interference with sensors and communication systems is critical. Nolan, gritting his teeth against the pain, pushed himself up, his side throbbing. He saw Lyra kneeling beside him, her twilight snow skin illuminated by the flickering emergency lights, her large eyes wide with concern. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. He coughed, tasting blood. Just peachy, he managed, forcing a wry smile. Defense systems a bit overzealous, though. Assessing the damage, he realized the situation was dire. The defense system, partially activated and now malfunctioning, was a liability, potentially attracting more Krill attention or causing a catastrophic failure. Lyra, overwhelmed by guilt and fear for Nolan's safety, her bioluminescent lines pulsing rapidly, insisted, "We must deactivate it. It is too dangerous." Nolan shook his head, wincing. "Maybe, but it might still be our only chance against the Krill. We don't know what they're planning." Just then, the Valorian scout ship sent another message, the tone noticeably more aggressive. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Zara of the Valiant. We have detected Arcturian technology activation. Respond immediately. You are endangering us by activating this technology without our permission." Nolan frowned. The Valorian's increasingly aggressive tone didn't sit right with him. "Something's off," he muttered. "I'm delaying my response. Let's investigate this malfunction first." Working together, despite Nolan's injury and Lyra's distress, they traced the erratic energy pulses to a damaged control console in the main power node chamber. The air hummed with unstable energy, the scent of burnt circuits thick in the air. Nestled beneath a tangle of wires, they discovered a hidden override switch, its purpose obscured by layers of dust and neglect. Lyra recognized it instantly. "This is a failsafe," she said, her voice tight, "designed to shut down the defense system in case of a malfunction. But activating it will also disable the power nodes, leaving us vulnerable." Nolan ran a quick calculation in his head. Deactivating the power nodes would give them a temporary window of opportunity to repair the sensor and communication systems, allowing them to contact the Valorians or, if necessary, prepare a counterattack. "It's a risk, but it might be our best option." As Nolan reached for the override switch, Lyra gasped, her eyes widening, her bioluminescence flaring intensely. She recoiled, grabbing his arm. "No, don't do it." "What is it?" Nolan asked, his hand hovering over the switch. I saw them," she stammered, her voice trembling. "The Valorians. They will betray us. They will use the Arcturian technology to conquer other worlds." Nolan hesitated, torn between his desire to trust Lyra's visions and his need for a practical solution. "Lyra, I don't know. Trust me, Nolan. Please." "They cannot be trusted. We must find another way." He looked at her, seeing the fear and conviction in her eyes. He knew time was running out. Guardian detected the Krill interceptor preparing another energy blast, this time targeting the Wanderlust's engine room. Making a split-second decision, Nolan slammed his hand down on the override switch. The defense system sputtered and died, the erratic energy pulses ceasing. The power nodes went dark, plunging the Wanderlust into an eerie silence, the emergency lights dimming further. The sudden power loss disabled the Wanderlust's artificial gravity. Nolan and Lyra, caught off guard, tumbled through the engine room, colliding with consoles and equipment. Using the brief power outage to their advantage, Nolan, despite the throbbing pain in his side, managed to reroute auxiliary power to the communication systems. He sent a distress signal to the Valorian scout ship, deliberately omitting any mention of the defense system malfunction or Lyra's vision. The Valorian captain responded almost immediately. "Unidentified vessel, we have received your distress signal. We are offering to dock with your ship and provide emergency repairs. However, this assistance is contingent upon you agreeing to hand over control of the ship's Arcturian technology to the Valorian Republic." Nolan, knowing the Valorians' true intentions, faced a critical choice. Accept their offer and risk betrayal, or reject it and face the Krill attack alone. The Wanderlust adrift and powerless. Nolan tightened fists, the metallic tang of fear coating his tongue. Survival, he reminded himself, was paramount. "We accept your assistance, Captain," he said, forcing a tone of gratitude. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, a deal with devils in polished armor. But the alternative, drifting helplessly towards the Krill, was a death sentence. The Valorian scout ship, sleek and silver like a predatory fish, docked with the Wanderlust with a muted clang. A hiss of atmosphere filled the corridor as the connecting hatch cycled open, and a team of Valorian engineers, clad in pristine white suits, marched aboard. Leading them was Captain Alara, her face etched with professional concern. Her dark eyes scanned the bridge, taking in the patched consoles and flickering lights with a barely concealed air of disdain. "We detected a significant energy surge and a distress beacon," Ilara said, her voice crisp and efficient. "We are here to assess the damage and provide assistance, as per Valorian protocol. However," she paused, her gaze lingering on the exposed Arcturian circuitry, "I must express my concern about the uncontrolled use of unfamiliar technology. Such power, if mishandled, could attract unwanted attention and pose a significant risk to yourselves and others." While the Valorian engineers fanned out, their tools humming with barely audible energy, two heavily armed Valorian security personnel took up positions flanking the bridge entrance. Ilara gestured curtly. "For your own safety and to facilitate our assessment, I must ask that you remain on the bridge. My team will require unimpeded access to the ship's systems." It was an order, not a request. Nolan felt a surge of anger, but he swallowed it down. He glanced at Lyra, her twilight snow skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. Her expression was unreadable, but he sensed a subtle tension in her posture. He knew she was listening, feeling something, and she was. A subtle unease prickled at the back of Lyra's mind, a discordant note in the Valorian's carefully constructed facade of helpfulness. She focused her empathic senses, reaching out like a tendril into their thoughts. She detected a surface layer of concern, yes, but beneath that, a cold, calculating ambition, a hunger for something more than just a safe and stable ship. There was deception here, subtle but undeniable, a strong desire to control the Wanderlust's Arcturian systems. Nolan, meanwhile, was playing his own game of observation. He watched as the Valorian engineers moved with practiced efficiency, their movements precise and economical. But he noticed inconsistencies. One engineer, supposedly inspecting the life support system, spent an inordinate amount of time near the damaged defense system control console, his fingers dancing over the damaged interface with a knowing touch. Another kept glancing at Lyra, his expression a mix of curiosity and something darker. Apprehension? Greed? A chime from Guardian, the ship's cantankerous AI, cut through the tension. Unauthorized access detected. Valorian engineers attempting to bypass security protocols and access core systems, requesting authorization to initiate lockdown. Nolan's blood ran cold. "Captain Alara," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "My ship's AI is reporting unauthorized access attempts to the core systems. I must insist you order your engineers to cease immediately." Alara turned, her expression one of mild surprise. "A false alarm, I assure you. My engineers are simply running diagnostic scans to assess the extent of the damage, a necessary step to ensure your ship's safety." Her words were smooth, but her eyes held a glint of steel. Lyra touched his arm, her fingers cool against his skin. Her voice, barely a whisper, echoed in his mind. They are lying, Nolan. They intend to disable the weapons and hand me over to the Krill. They have promised them safe passage in exchange. The Krill. The name was like a shard of ice in Nolan's heart. He didn't doubt Lyra for a second. He'd seen the worry in her eyes when she spoke of them, the old dread that still stayed with her, despite long, cold sleep. He was out of options. Relying on the Valorians was risky. He had to act, and act fast. "Thank you for your assistance, Captain," Nolan said, a newfound dedication hardening his voice. "But I believe we can manage from here. I must ask you and your team to disembark immediately." Ilara's smile vanished. "I'm afraid that's not possible. For your own safety, of course. We cannot leave you adrift in this sector with a malfunctioning vessel." "That's my decision to make," Nolan countered, his hand instinctively moving towards the emergency comms panel. Before he could reach it, one of the Valorian security guards moved, his weapon raised. "I must advise against that, Captain Clark." Nolan froze, his mind racing. He needed a diversion, something to create chaos and give him a chance to regain control. He glanced at Lyra, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. They were thinking the same thing. "Guardian," Nolan said, his voice loud and clear. "Initiate emergency engine diagnostic cycle. Maximum power output. Override all safety protocols." A klaxon blared through the ship, red lights flashing. The Valorian engineers, startled, scrambled to their feet. Captain Ilara's eyes narrowed. "What is the meaning of this?" "Just a little preventative maintenance," Nolan said, a grim smile playing on his lips. "You understand. Safety first." As the Valorian engineers rushed to respond to the false alarm, their faces etched with concern, Nolan and Lyra slipped out of the bridge, heading towards the main power node chamber. They moved quickly and silently, using their combined knowledge of the ship's layout to avoid detection. The power node chamber was a cramped, dimly lit space filled with humming machinery and sparking conduits. It was the heart of the ship's energy distribution system and the key to reactivating the defense system. As they approached the control console, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. It was Captain Ilara, her face contorted with rage. "I should have known you couldn't be trusted," she snarled, her weapon raised. "The Arcturian technology will be ours, one way or another." A tense standoff ensued, the fate of the Wanderlust hanging in the balance. Nolan and Lyra faced off against Captain Ilara and her Valorian security team, the air thick with tension and the threat of violence. Lyra focused her empathic abilities, reaching out to the Valorians, flooding their minds with a wave of disorientation and confusion. It was a temporary measure, but it gave Nolan the opening he needed. He lunged forward, dodging Ilara's energy blast, and reached the override switch. His fingers closed around the cold metal, and he slammed it down. The power nodes hummed to life, bathing the chamber in a blinding light. The defense system, dormant for centuries, sputtered and surged, unleashing another wild surge of energy that knocked out the Valorian security team, sending them crashing to the floor. Captain Ilara, enraged by Nolan's defiance, lunged for Lyra, her eyes burning with a fanatical gleam. "The Arcturian holds the key!" "I will have it!" Nolan intercepted her, throwing a punch that connected with her jaw. Ilara staggered back, but quickly recovered, her movements precise and deadly. She was a trained combatant, and Nolan was just a desperate pilot. They grappled, trading blows in the cramped chamber. While Lyra struggled to stabilize the defense system, her fingers flying over the damaged console, the air crackled with energy. and the ship groaned under the strain. During the fight, the malfunctioning defense system emitted a powerful energy pulse, a wave of raw power that washed over the chamber. It struck Captain Alara full force, sending her flying backwards, her body convulsing as she crashed against a wall. She lay still, her eyes wide and unseeing, seemingly dead. Nolan stared at her, his chest heaving, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. He hadn't meant to kill her, but he had no time for regrets. They had to get out of here. "Lyra, now," he shouted, grabbing her hand. Realizing they had no choice but to escape, Nolan and Lyra raced back to the docking clamps connecting the Wanderlust to the Valorian scout ship. With a few quick commands, Nolan severed the clamps, sending the Valorian ship spinning away into the void. The Wanderlust, damaged and adrift, was once again alone in space. The Valorian ship, its crew stranded and enraged, was a new enemy. And the Krill, drawn by the energy surge, were closing in. The hunt was on. Lyra, sensing the Valorians closing in, urged Nolan to leave her behind, believing she was the only one who could activate the weapon and protect it from falling into the wrong hands. Nolan vehemently refused, declaring that they would face this challenge together, showcasing his unwavering loyalty and protectiveness. As the Valorians breached the station, Nolan and Lyra prepared for a desperate last stand, determined to protect the Arcturian weapon and their newfound bond, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. The first shot slammed into the corridor wall just meters from Nolan, showering them in sparks and pulverized duracrete. He yanked Lyra behind a toppled console, the Wanderlust groaning in protest as it struggled to maintain its weakened orbit around the derelict station. Life support flickered, the recycled air growing thin and metallic. "We can't stay here," Nolan shouted over the din of weapons fire. He ripped a panel from the console, revealing a tangle of wires. "I'm rerouting power to the station's internal sensors. Maybe we can get a better picture of what we're up against." He spliced a few wires together, ignoring the stinging shock that ran up his arm. The panel flickered to life, displaying a grainy, thermal image of the corridor. Multiple Valorian figures were advancing, weapons raised. Lyra, her face pale but resolute, frantically worked at the damaged navigation console, her fingers flying over the alien symbols. The Guardian is detecting multiple Valorian distress signals. They survived the undocking. They're calling for reinforcements. As if to punctuate her statement, a klaxon blared through the ship. Long-range sensors detect a Krill warship rapidly approaching our location. The cold metallic voice of the Guardian echoed through the Wanderlust. "We are being actively hunted." Nolan cursed under his breath. "Damn it, they're not giving us a single break." Lyra's fingers stilled. The Valorians, they sabotaged the Wanderlust's primary FTL drive during their repairs. Her voice was tight with anger. "A jump to hyperspace is impossible." Nolan pounded his fist on the console. "Those treacherous bastards." He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. Okay, no FTL, but what about the secondary jump drive? "The short-range one?" Lyra frowned. "It's damaged, barely functional. I know, but maybe we can use it to our advantage. A series of small hops, jumps to evade the Krill and Valorians. Buy us some time to repair the main FTL." It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Lyra nodded slowly, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "It's risky, Nolan. The jump drive could overload." "I know," he said, meeting her gaze, "but we don't have a choice." He scrambled back to the pilot's chair, his hands flying over the controls. Lyra, despite her own reservations, trusted Nolan's instincts. She knew he would do everything in his power to protect her, to protect them both. The Wanderlust shuddered violently as Nolan initiated the jump sequence. The stars outside the viewport stretched and blurred, then snapped back into focus. They were still near the derelict station, but a few thousand kilometers further out. The jump had been successful, but the ship felt even more unstable than before. Jump drive efficiency down to 47%, the Guardian reported grimly. Further malfunctions detected. Nolan swore again. We can't keep doing this. One more jump and that thing will blow. Lyra's brow furrowed. Wait, I'm sensing something. A presence. She closed her eyes, her bioluminescent lines glowing brighter. There's a strong Arcturian presence within the space station, a beacon of hope, but also a sense of ancient sorrow. Nolan stared at her, his expression skeptical. A derelict space station? Lyra, that place is a death trap. I know, but we must investigate, she insisted, her voice filled with urgency. I believe it holds the key to repairing the Wanderlust, or finding a safe haven. Nolan hesitated. He didn't like the idea of venturing into that crumbling ruin, but he couldn't deny the intensity of Lyra's conviction. He trusted her instincts, even if he didn't fully understand them. All right, he said, sighing. But we stick together, and we watch each other's backs. As they approached the station, its true state became horrifyingly clear. Huge sections were missing, torn apart by some ancient cataclysm. Automated defense systems, remnants of a long-forgotten war, still patrolled the corridors, their targeting sensors glowing ominously. Automated turrets detected, the Guardian warned. Multiple security drones active. The Wanderlust limped into a docking bay, its hull scraping against the station's ruined exterior. Nolan and Lyra, armed with whatever makeshift weapons they could find, cautiously made their way into the station's darkened corridors. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, making the station feel even more menacing. Automated turrets swiveled on their mounts, their energy weapons crackling with power. Malfunctioning security drones buzzed through the corridors, their optical sensors scanning for intruders. Nolan and Lyra moved with a newfound fluidity, their teamwork becoming increasingly intuitive. Nolan used his knowledge of human engineering to disable the turrets, while Lyra used her empathic abilities to anticipate the drone's movements. They were becoming a seamless unit, their strengths complementing each other's weaknesses. They finally reached the station's central computer, a massive console humming with residual power. Lyra placed her hand on the console, her bioluminescent lines flaring. I can access it, she said, her voice strained, but the data is heavily corrupted. She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the alien symbols. After a few tense moments, the screen flickered to life, displaying a series of fragmented images and text. This station, Lyra said. Her voice hushed. It was a research outpost, dedicated to studying a unique form of energy weapon. An energy weapon? Nolan asked, his brow furrowed. What kind of weapon? One the Krill desperately seek, Lyra replied grimly. They found a damaged Arcturian data log, its images flickering and distorted. It showed the station in its prime, filled with scientists and researchers. Then the images shifted, showing the station under attack by Krill warships. The attack was brutal and swift, leaving the station in ruins. The Krill destroyed this station centuries ago, Lyra said, her voice filled with sorrow. To prevent the Arcturians from developing this weapon. The data log also revealed the weapon's location, a hidden chamber within the station, protected by a complex energy field. The energy field. It can only be deactivated by an Arcturian with a specific genetic marker, Lyra said, her eyes widening. She paused, her gaze meeting Nolan's. I possess this genetic marker. I am the key to unlocking the weapon. Nolan stared at her, his mind racing. This weapon, it could be their salvation, their only chance against the Krill. But it could also be a curse, a weapon of unimaginable power that could fall into the wrong hands. As they approached the hidden chamber, a warning klaxon blared through the station. Multiple ships detected. Valorian signatures confirmed. Nolan cursed. They're here. Lyra, sensing the Valorians closing in, her face pale, turned to Nolan, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. Nolan, you must leave me. I am the only one who can activate the weapon. I must protect it from falling into the wrong hands, even if it means sacrificing myself. Nolan stepped closer, his hand reaching out to cup her face. No, he said, his voice firm. We face this together. Always. As the Valorians breached the station, their weapons fire echoing through the corridors, Nolan and Lyra prepared for a desperate last stand, determined to protect the Arcturian weapon and their newfound bond, even if it meant sacrificing themselves. The automated turrets, reprogrammed with a few frantic keystrokes from Nolan, spat emerald energy bolts, chewing through the corridor ahead. Left, now right. They're flanking, Lyra shouted, her voice tight with urgency. Nolan ducked behind a sparking conduit, just as a volley of energy blasts scorched the wall where he'd been standing. The acrid tang of ozone filled the air, mixing with the metallic scent of something burning. They reached the chamber entrance, a reinforced blast door now serving as a barricade for a Valorian squad. The soldiers, clad in sleek black armor that masked their faces behind polarized visors, stood shoulder to shoulder, their energy shields shimmering with terrifying power. Stand down, aliens! Surrender, and you may yet live, barked a distorted voice from a helmet speaker. Nolan swore under his breath. We're not going to talk our way out of this one, are we? Lyra shook her head, her ocean blue eyes narrowed. Their shields. They are of a higher frequency than anything I have encountered. Nolan glanced around, his gaze snagging on a sparking junction box. An idea, as reckless as it was desperate, sparked in his mind. Cover me. While Lyra unleashed a barrage of energy pulses that forced the Valorians to huddle behind their shields, Nolan frantically ripped wires from the junction box, sparks flying. He worked with a speed born of desperation, sweat beading on his forehead. In moments, he had cobbled together a crude device, a tangle of wires, capacitors, and a focusing lens scavenged from a broken scanner. This is either going to work, or it's going to vaporize us all, he muttered, hefting the device. He activated it. The device sputtered, crackled, and emitted a high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache. He aimed it at the Valorian shields. The shimmering barriers flickered, then died with a pop, leaving the soldiers exposed. Lyra didn't hesitate. She unleashed a concentrated blast of Arcturian energy, a wave of shimmering blue light that washed over the Valorians. They crumpled to the ground, unconscious but alive. But one of them, even as he fell, managed to activate a small device on his wrist. A tiny red light blinked urgently. They sent a distress signal, Lyra said, her voice grim. They pushed through the blast doors and into the hidden chamber. It wasn't a storage room, as they'd expected, but a vast, cathedral-like space filled with glowing energy conduits that pulsed with raw power. At the center of the room, integrated into the station's very core, was the weapon. A massive structure of crystals and metal, humming with nearly unleashed energy. The weapon. Lyra breathed, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. She approached it, her face etched with willpower. Nolan watched her. his heart pounding in his chest. The AI. It's ancient, unstable. Merging with it could shatter my mind, Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. Nolan stepped forward, grabbing her arm gently. Then don't do it. There has to be another way. Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a sorrow that cut him to the core. There isn't, Nolan. This is our only chance to stop the krill. As she began the merging process, tendrils of energy reaching out to connect with the weapon, a holographic projection flickered to life. An ancient Arcturian, his face lined with worry and regret, materialized before them. Greetings, the Arcturian said, his voice somber. If you are seeing this, then the weapon has been found. Know this. It is a Sun Eater. Its use will leave scars on the fabric of reality itself. It is a last resort, to be used only against an enemy capable of destroying entire star systems. Its activation will have unforeseen consequences. Lyra recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth. A Sun Eater? Nolan felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean? This weapon? It is designed to consume stars, to deny the krill their sustenance. The Arcturian continued, but its power is vast, and its use will have repercussions that we cannot foresee. Lyra's face was filled with doubt. She looked at Nolan, her eyes pleading for guidance. Is this the right choice? Can we unleash such power even against such a monstrous enemy? Nolan took her hands in his. Your people, they valued balance, harmony. Think about what this weapon will do, Lyra. Not just to the krill, but to everything else. Before Lyra could answer, the chamber doors burst open. Commander Varys strode in, followed by a squad of heavily armed Valorians. Enough, Varys snarled. The time for hesitation is over. He grabbed Nolan, shoving a weapon against his temple. Activate the weapon, alien, or I will execute your human pet. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. Varys sneered. The krill are a threat, yes, but they are not the only obstacle to Valorian dominance. With this weapon, we will bring the entire galaxy to its knees. Nolan saw Lyra's distress and knew he had to act. He had planted a series of explosive charges earlier, hoping to use them as a last resort. Now was the time. Go to hell, Varys. He spat and triggered the detonator. A series of explosions rocked the chamber, throwing Varys and his squad off balance. The room filled with smoke and debris. Lyra seized the opportunity and broke free from Varys' grasp. During the chaos, Lyra made a split-second decision. Instead of fully activating the weapon, she channeled her energy into its core, pushing it beyond its limits. The weapon began to glow with blinding intensity, the crystals humming with a frenzied energy. Lyra, what are you doing? Nolan shouted over the din. I cannot unleash this weapon, Nolan, but I can deny it to them, she replied, her voice strained. With a final surge of power, Lyra overloaded the weapon's energy core. It exploded in a shower of sparks and energy, the force of the blast throwing everyone to the ground. The energy surge rippled outwards, disabling the Valorian ships in orbit and destabilizing the space station. Alarms blared, the station shook violently, and sections of the ceiling began to collapse. The station is collapsing, Nolan yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand. We have to get out of here. They scrambled to their feet and fled the chamber, dodging falling debris as they ran through the collapsing corridors. The station was falling apart around them, metal groaning and twisting under immense strain. They reached the Wanderlust, but it was heavily damaged, its hull scarred and blackened. Valorian escape pods surrounded the ship, indicating a full-scale evacuation was underway. They're all abandoning ship, Nolan said grimly, surveying the scene. As they prepared to make their escape, Lyra's eyes widened with fear. She clutched his arm, her grip tight. "The krill! They're here," she whispered, drawn to the weapon's energy. A massive shadow fell across the viewport. A krill warship, its hull a nightmarish tapestry of chitin and metal, decloaked nearby, looming over the dying space station. As Nolan and Lyra reached the Wanderlust, the space around them seemed to warp, then crack, as a krill warship decloaked. Its obsidian hull, a jagged landscape of armored plates and weapon emplacements, blotted out a significant portion of the already damaged space station. The large warship loomed above Wanderlust, making it seem a small craft before a giant. Before Nolan could even fully grasp the danger, the warship launched a group of landing ships. They shot towards the space station like metallic wasps, each one a promise of brutal, close-quarters combat. The station's klaxons blared, a cacophony of alarms that underscored their desperate situation. The krill weren't here for a parley. They were here for the Arcturian weapon, and anyone who stood in their way. "We have to move now," Nolan yelled, adrenaline surging through him. He grabbed Lyra's hand and raced towards the Wanderlust's cockpit, the ship's internal lights flickering erratically with each new explosion rocking the station. Lyra, her face pale but determined, focused her energy, attempting to bring the ship's damaged systems online. Sparks flew from exposed wires as she worked, the air thick with the smell of burning circuits. Nolan slammed into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying across the cracked console. He initiated the launch sequence, only to be met with a string of error messages. "Launch bays are clogged with Valorian evacuation ships. We can't get out that way." His voice was tight with frustration. The Valorians' desperate attempt to flee the krill attack had become their prison. Lyra, her silver eyes glowing with an inner light, placed her hand on a section of the console. There is another way, a hidden access tunnel. It is not ideal, but it may be our only chance." Her voice was strained, as if she were accessing memories long dormant. Nolan didn't hesitate. Lead the way. He trusted her instincts, her connection to this ship. They raced back through the Wanderlust, Lyra guiding him towards a section of the ship he hadn't even known existed. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow, cylindrical tunnel barely wide enough for the Wanderlust to fit through. Nolan swallowed hard. This is going to be tight. He expertly maneuvered the Wanderlust into the tunnel, the ship's hull scraping against the metal walls. The tunnel was dark and claustrophobic, filled with falling debris and structural failures. Nolan, his hands a blur on the controls, navigated the treacherous passage with a skill born of years spent flying through asteroid fields and dodging space pirates. Alarms wailed as the ship narrowly avoided collisions, the tunnel walls seeming to close in around them. Finally, with a jarring lurch, the Wanderlust emerged from the tunnel. They were outside the station, but relief was brief. They were right in the path of the enemy ship, exposed in its sights. The enemy ship opened fire. A barrage of energy weapons slammed into the Wanderlust, the ship shuddering violently under the assault. The shields, already weakened, flickered and groaned. Alarms blared, warning of critical system failures. Lyra cried out, clutching her head. "The shields! They will not hold for long." Suddenly, her eyes widened. "The ship! It has an energy shield system, dormant, but it is there. Can you activate it?" Nolan yelled over the din of alarms and explosions. "It requires a significant power surge, more than we have." Nolan's mind raced. He scanned the power distribution schematics, searching for a solution. "I can reroute power from the life support and auxiliary systems. It'll be risky, but it might give us a chance." Do it! Lyra urged, her voice filled with urgency. Nolan didn't hesitate. He rerouted the power, plunging the ship into near darkness. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thin, but the energy shields flickered to life, bathing the Wanderlust in a shimmering blue aura. The next barrage of Krill energy weapons slammed into the shields, but this time they held. The shields buckled and groaned, but they didn't fail. "They're unstable," Lyra cried. "The shields won't last long at this rate." Nolan gritted his teeth. They needed another solution, and fast. He scanned the ship's systems, desperately searching for anything that could give them an edge. "The cloaking device," Lyra exclaimed. "The Wanderlust. It has a cloaking device, a relic of its Arcturian design. Can we use it?" "It is heavily damaged. It requires precise calibration and power." "I can fix it," Nolan said, his voice filled with purpose. "But I need your help. I need you to tell me what to do." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her energy. Her silver skin began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. "The Krill. They are moving to flank us. They anticipate our next move." She guided Nolan's hands, her touch sending shivers down his spine even in the midst of the chaos. "Adjust the frequency modulator. Bypass the damaged relay. Reroute the signal through the auxiliary core." Nolan worked feverishly, his fingers flying across the console. He trusted Lyra's instincts, her connection to the ship. He could feel her energy flowing through him, guiding his movements, amplifying his skills. As Nolan completed the repairs, a jarring clang reverberated through the Wanderlust. A Krill boarding pod had latched onto the ship. Red lights flashed, and alarms blared even louder. "They're boarding us!" Nolan yelled. Lyra's eyes widened, her face filled with iron will. "There is one last option. A fail-safe measure. A final option, meant to keep the ship secure from hostile capture." Nolan looked at her, his pulse quickening in his throat. The fail-safe. It was a final resolve. They shared a moment of intense eye contact, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of their situation, the possibility of their impending deaths. In that moment, Nolan saw not just an alien, but a kindred spirit, a warrior who was willing to sacrifice everything to protect what she believed in. Nolan reached for the self-destruct activation switch. "Let's make sure they don't get their hands on anything," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. He armed the sequence, setting the timer for 5 minutes. 5 minutes to escape, or 5 minutes to take down the Krill warship with them. The Wanderlust shuddered as the Krill soldiers breached the ship. They stormed through the corridors, their weapons firing, their voices guttural and menacing. "We have to buy ourselves some time," Nolan yelled. Lyra raised her hands, her silver skin glowing even brighter. She unleashed a wave of Arcturian energy, disorienting the Krill soldiers, throwing them off balance. Nolan, taking advantage of the momentary confusion, opened fire with his blaster, taking down several Krill soldiers with well-aimed shots. The self-destruct timer counted down. 4:30, 4:29分, 4:28分. Nolan and Lyra fought their way back to the cockpit, their movements a blur of action and desperation. They reached the pilot's seats, their eyes fixed on the cloaking device controls. 3:15分, 3:14分, 3:13分. Nolan flipped the activation switch. The Wanderlust shimmered, then vanished from sight, leaving the Krill soldiers to face their impending doom. But had they escaped, or had they simply delayed the inevitable? Their fate, like the newly activated cloaking device, hung precariously in the balance. As the Krill soldiers breached the cockpit door, their chitinous armor gleaming under the emergency lights, Nolan pounded his fist onto the activation rune. for the cloaking device. The wanderlust flickered, shimmering for a heartbeat before vanishing from visual sight, leaving the Krill soldiers disoriented in the suddenly empty cockpit. "Having a little trouble there, fellas?" Nolan's voice crackled over the ship's internal comms, filled with a bravado he barely felt. "This old girl has a few tricks left. Care to play hide and seek?" He led them on a wild goose chase through the wanderlust's labyrinthine corridors, his boots echoing on the metal grating, each footstep a countdown with the self-destruct timer ticking away. Lyra, her fingers flying across a captured Krill.com device, her brow furrowed in concentration, suddenly looked up, her twilight snowskin paling further. "Nolan, I've accessed their network. Their primary objective? It isn't salvage. It's destruction. They know about the archive. They know it's within me." The realization hit them both like a physical blow. They couldn't escape. The Krill were too close. The wanderlust too damaged. The self-destruct was their only option, a desperate gamble to prevent the Krill from obtaining the Arcturian genetic archive, the last hope for their civilization. "Then we make sure it's not a complete loss," Nolan said, his voice hardening with persistence. "We use these last minutes. We transmit a beacon to the sanctuary." Working with desperate speed, Lyra interfaced with the ship's ancient systems, while Nolan fought off a wave of despair. They input the coordinates, a faint hope flickering in their hearts. As they did, the Krill warship, sensing the energy spike, unleashed a final devastating barrage. Explosions rocked the wanderlust, crippling its systems, sending sparks flying. With seconds to spare, Lyra completed the transmission, sending the beacon containing the genetic archive hurtling into the vastness of space, a whispered prayer on her lips. Nolan turned to Lyra, his face etched with a bittersweet acceptance. "We did good, Lyra. We gave them a chance." Lyra reached out, her slender fingers tracing the lines of his face. "Because of you, Nolan. Because of your courage. I love you." "I love you too, Lyra," Nolan whispered, pulling her close, their embrace a fragile shield against the impending destruction. The self-destruct timer reached 0. But instead of oblivion, a blue light enveloped them. Just as the wanderlust was about to explode, a squadron of sleek silver warships materialized, their energy cannons blazing. The Valorians. Drawn by Lyra's earlier distress signal, they intercepted the Krill warship, buying Nolan and Lyra precious seconds. "Emergency teleportation initiated," a calm voice announced over the comms. "Stand by for extraction." Using an emergency teleportation device salvaged from the escape pods, the Valorians beamed Nolan and Lyra to safety moments before the wanderlust erupted in a blinding flash, destroying the Krill boarding party and severely damaging the Krill warship. Later, aboard a Valorian flagship, sipping lukewarm synth tea, Nolan and Lyra watched on the main view screen as the Valorian fleet, a symphony of coordinated firepower, systematically dismantled the Krill warship, securing the sector. "They won't be bothering anyone else for a while," Nolan murmured, relief washing over him. Lyra turned to him, a glimmer of hope in her large, empathetic eyes. "The beacon. It was not just a signal, Nolan. It was also a key. A complex encryption algorithm that unlocks the genetic archive, ensuring its safety and accessibility at the sanctuary." Months later, Nolan and Lyra stood on the surface of a newly terraformed planet, the location of the Arcturian sanctuary. A gentle breeze rustled through the nascent forests, carrying the scent of newly bloomed flora. Around them, other Arcturian survivors, awakened from cryo-sleep, gazed in wonder at their new home. Lyra stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. resonating with a newfound authority. "Arcturians," she began, her gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd, "we have endured unimaginable loss. We have faced extinction. But we are here, we are alive, and we are home." She paused, her eyes meeting Nolan's, a deep love shining within them. "We must remember our past, honor our ancestors, but we must also embrace the future. A future built on hope, resilience, and the understanding that even in the darkest of times, light can be found. We owe our survival to the courage and compassion of a human, Nolan Clark, and to the unwavering spirit of humanity." Nolan felt a lump form in his throat, humbled by her words. He was just a guy who inherited a broken-down ship, but somehow he had helped save a civilization. As the Arcturians erupted in applause, Lyra turned to Nolan, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Remember when we first met, on that derelict ship? I thought I was doomed. I never imagined that you'd end up leading your people to a new home, and I'd be standing right beside you." Nolan finished, his heart swelling with pride. Lyra reached out, taking his hand, her twilight snow skin warm against his. "You showed me that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope can prevail. That courage can be found in the most unexpected places. And that love can bridge any divide." They embraced, gazing at the rising sun over the new Arcturian homeworld, its golden rays bathing the planet in a warm, hopeful light. Their love, a beacon of hope for a future where different species can coexist and thrive. A testament to human courage and compassion. A future where anything, even the impossible, was possible.